Hello, this is Heather Hoffman, and I'm here with Pinkfresh Studio to share with you these two cards that I created using some of the newest release. I've used the Sweet Lemonade stamp set from Pinkfresh Studio paired up with two other new release stamp sets to make these fun, bright, happy cards. I'm starting off with the Sweet Lemonade stamps and die set. I've already die cut two of the jars using the coordinating dies, and while you can easily stamp these then die cut them, I decided to die cut them first, then use my MISTI and the negative die cut to line up and stamp those solid images on. It just makes it really easy to line up a big solid image like that and get it perfectly lined up on my die cut. Now for that bottom part of that, I wanted to add the liquid, a little bit of shine at the bottom for that. So I decided to stamp that with clear watermark ink and heat emboss it with clear powder. The only mistake I made, so the colored ink I used was dye ink. Which you usually can't use for embossing. However, it was such a solid, big image that the ink was still a little bit too wet, and I ended up with my embossing powder sticking to everything. So I brushed it off using a clean brush, and then I just used my heat gun to heat set and dry that dye ink a little bit, and then went over them again with my embossing powder tool, stamped again in the watermark ink, and this time my clear embossing powder only stuck to where I wanted to, so that worked a lot better. So make sure and either leave some time in between or heat set your image, even with a dye ink that you wouldn't normally think of for embossing. Now I'm pulling out the die, the oval foliage wreath die. There's a coordinating stamp set, but for these cards I'm not using that. I'm die cutting these from white cardstock. It's Neenah. This is 80-pound cardstock. Instead of using a super heavy, I used a little bit lighter weight because as you can see, I like to kind of turn the leaves up a little. And while you can do that with the heavier cardstock quite well also, I like it better with the thinner cardstock because you don't get as much of a crease. It just kind of pops up and adds some dimension. And you can really see the difference that makes. While it looks beautiful just die cut in, when you pop all those leaves up just a tiny bit, you get such beautiful dimension. Now I've gone ahead and done that to both of those cards, and now I'm pulling out another new release set called Make a Wish, and for this I'm just going to use some of those little bitty flowers and leaves, and I'm stamping them with a few different colors of ink. Starting off with those little tiny flowers, I'm stamping them, these are all Simon Says stamp inks, Duckling, Hollyhock, and then a bunch of the leaves with Jellybean, and I kind of sped that up so you didn't have to watch slow stamping, and the same thing with all the die cutting. I used the coordinating dies to cut all those little bitty images out. And so now I have a whole pile of flowers and leaves, and now I'm just planning my arrangement to kind of tuck them around that wreath to add a little bit of flair and fun. And I just think it adds some life to that wreath a little bit too. So I paired up the yellow with the blue cup and the pink ones with the coral apricot colored one. I've already attached some flowers and leaves down on the other one now. I kind of skipped ahead here. But as you can see, I'm just adding a dot of liquid adhesive behind each of the flowers. And then to tuck the leaves on, I'm adding a little bit of that good liquid adhesive at the base of the leaves. And then just using my fingers to kind of tuck those leaves under the flowers a little bit, alternating as I go around the wreath so they kind of come in at different angles and some different. And once I finish attaching all of those, I'd added one leaf under each flower, and I ended up with just a few leaves left over. So I went ahead and tucked a couple more under just two of the flowers just to vary it a little bit and use them all up. If I'd wanted to, I could have cut more leaves. And you could easily put more flowers in this too, but I liked that nice soft effect of just a few. Now to get the straw in our drink, I love this straw image. I used the same piece of cardstock that I used for the bottles, cut out the negative, and this straw image lines up perfectly in there with no effort. Look how exactly it stamps the stripes on the straw. I love how perfectly that works and lines up, and it was so easy. So I went ahead and did those, coordinating the color of the straw to the flowers on each of those cards. And then I'm going to stamp my sentiments, and I like to use my MISTI to do this part because at this point I've almost finished my cards and I've put a lot of time and effort, and since I haven't added the sentiments yet, it would be really sad to ruin them and stamp crooked or mess up my stamping or anything like that. So I added the two smaller sentiments from Sweet Lemonade and stamped them on there. And now I'm going to attach the straws onto the bottles. I found just a tiny little line of that same liquid adhesive just down the bottom part of the straw to attach. It worked very well, and I put them both at kind of a slightly different angle, just like you would have them if you put them in a jar of lemonade. Now I'm attaching those down with a little bit of foam adhesive just to add a little touch of dimension to these. And then as a final finishing touch, I'm pulling out some jewels that I'm going to attach around on those flowers. I'm using a Crystal Ninja tool. It's kind of my favorite way to attach small decorative items like this. It works really well, kind of like a jewel picker, but a little bit, it seems like it lasts a little longer. So I've attached a jewel in the center of each of those flowers. Look at that little tiny bit of sparkle. And then as a final finishing touch, once I turned the video off, it felt like they needed a little something more, so I added a little bit of just some twine that I tied around the top of those bottles. With the foam adhesive on there, it was easy to tuck that down in and just tie in a little tiny bow and add one final bit of texture. Thanks so much for coming by today. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you'll give these a try.